Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Heitland Show, where I interview experts from different fields to connect the dots of innovation and entrepreneurship. Today's guest calls himself an independent portfolio career professional. He's the author of the book Marketer in Chief: How Each President Sold the American Idea. He grew up in a family of artists, immigrants, and entrepreneurs. They taught him how to carefully observe the world, see patterns before others notice them, and use those insights to create new innovations. Please welcome to the show Jason Voiovich. Hello, Jason. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jens. How are you?
I'm good too. Looking forward to our conversation and learn from you.
Yeah, no, me too. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, and I'm really eager to. You have an amazing logo behind you, which we need to dive into later. But let's get first into who you are. So, who are you? What is your story? Where do you come from? What are you doing?
No, it's a great question. I've been in product development and innovation my entire career. It's what I've always wanted to do. I graduated from college, went right into product management and developing new products and innovating. So it's exciting for me, but I think when most people think about product innovation and they think about a background of a person like me, like, oh, you're really into strategy and venture capital and technology. And yeah, those things are all great, but you know, my I think innovation a little bit differently. I'm a Minnesota kid in the United States. Minnesota is right in the center of the country. It's right in the heart of dairy country. And
Hmm.
I like to tell the story when I was kind of early in my career and working on new products for cow reproduction. Here's the thing. Okay, cow reproduction is a big deal and it's different than most people think it is. If you didn't grow up on a farm, this is a little bit of news for people that dairy cattle only give milk when they're pregnant,
Hmm.
and when they're lactating. I mean, it's like, well, gosh, that's obvious. But so the big deal is cows need to be pregnant all the time. That's basically the secret of the dairy industry is cows are pregnant all the time. Well, in order to make sure cows are pregnant all the time, there aren't like on a dairy farm, there aren't bulls walking around, doing their bull thing
Yeah.
for the cows. Basically, what happens is it's like a big turkey baster, and they artificially inseminate. So here I am, Minnesota kid, walking out in a cow field, following vet techs around while they're with this big turkey baster full of bull semen, artificially inseminating cows along the way. And they need to figure out the trick was to figure out when the cows were in estrus, kind of ready to be inseminated. Otherwise,
Hmm.
you waste bull semen. That's apparently this stuff's really valuable, Jens. I didn't think it was that valuable, but apparently it's really valuable. Lucky for the bull, I guess, because this is all the bull needs to do is produce bull semen. So great. So I'm there following around, and the innovation, we're working with the team, and we got to figure out how do you tell when the cow is in estrus?
Hmm.
And the little secret is that female cows mount each other when they're in heat. And the number of times a cow has been mounted kind of tells you what that is. So the farm hands I'm following around, picture this now, city kid from Minneapolis, Minnesota, in a farm field, following cows around with a guy with bull semen artificially inseminating, and cow hands circling around, telling us that cow, that cow, that cow, but not that cow, and asking the question, how on earth do you know
Huh.
what that is? And like, well, we see the cows, we know the cows. You're out here every day. We know the cows. And the innovation was kind of like, how do you help the farm hands do that? And there was basically the innovation was basically a scratch off lottery ticket
Hmm.
because you put it on the back of the cow. And when the cows mount each other, it rubs off the material. And instead of getting lucky lottery numbers, you got like this fluorescent uh, uh, thing that would kind of shine through, and you could see from a distance which cow need to be inseminated. Here's the thing, kind of three key lessons for your listeners on doing that sort of thing in the cow field. If you find yourself in the cow field, number one, Do not approach the cow from the back directly. Okay. The cows defecate and urinate without warning. So do be careful about that or be quick on your feet. Number two, don't wear shoes with holes. That I can't stress that enough. I cannot stress that enough. And the third, uh, do not eat a large meal before you go, because see previous answer, both previous answers about that. Here's the thing: my perspective on innovation is dirty. It's hands-on. It is in the field. Innovation is about solving real problems with real people. That's kind of what gets me up in the morning and gets me excited to go. Like, how is this applicable? Like, yeah, I love strategy. I love investors. I love all that stuff. But if you're not figuring out when to shove bull semen in, you're not really innovating. Then you're just talking about it. This is a different sort of thing. It's hands-on, dirty work sometimes, but that's what's fulfilling about it. That's when you know you're really innovating. So that was probably not the story that your listeners were thinking they were going to get this morning.
Yeah, that's an awesome story to start off. And that's like you said, it's hands-on innovation. It's not, yeah, let's theoretically think how this could be done. It's really like let's figure it out. Let's be
Exactly.
clear.
I think too many people, when they think about marketing and they think about innovation, they think of it in these kind of abstract terms, and they have these charts that have Venn diagrams, and they've got bell curves, and they have four blocker charts from Boston Consulting Group, and they talk about innovation. You know, until you've stood behind a cow and jumped out of the way of a urine stream, you're not really innovating. I'm sorry to tell you. Like, you got to get in there and you got to get your hands dirty. And if you don't, you're just talking about it. And we don't like to just talk about it. Innovation is an active contact sport, quite literally in this case.
Awesome. So let's look a little bit on how did you get into the marketing space? So you have been writing a book, and we will dive, of course, deeply into that book and how you get to that book and a lot of other stories. How did you go from working with innovation and thinking about marketing? What was the switch for you to get into that?
Yeah, it's funny when most people think about marketing, they think about advertising.
Hmm.
The part of the marketing that they see, whether it's digital advertising, or if I talked with my dad, who was an advertising creative director, it was all about broadcast television or magazine and print. That was kind of big back in the day. Kids, a magazine is a dead tree that we used to put ink on, and you would page through it. You'd actually physically take it in your hands.
You can't swipe.
It's Yeah, you can't swipe this, and you can't click on it for more. Just a heads up. Those of you of a certain age will remember what that is. Oh, but here's the thing: when I got into marketing, I took more of that kind of four P's sort of approach: product, price, place, and promotion. Kind of the
Hmm.
classic four P's definition. Promotion is only the part of marketing that you see. And I do some of that work, and I work on some of that because when you have a new innovation, you need to communicate that new innovation to people, and you need to find ways to get them to uh, become aware of it and get interested in it. You got to do all of those things. But really, the part of marketing that you don't see is the part that's interesting. The part where you're figuring out, how do you solve a problem for a customer, for a client. That's product marketing. How do you kind of create that exchange of value that makes sense? That's price marketing. How do you get it to them so that it's in the place where they want to buy it? That's place marketing and channel marketing. All of those things, you just don't see them. For most people, they're really hidden, but they're so important. The advertising is kind of like the tip of the iceberg. The rest of marketing is below the waterline. And I like the stuff below the waterline. That's what's interesting to me. As much as I love great advertising, uh, it's the other things that I find more fascinating.
It's like you said. I mean, you literally explained applied innovation. That's why I'm wearing the applied
Exactly.
innovation
I love
T-shirt
it. I
today.
love that shirt.
So it's also it's like applying marketing is the real thing that interests you and that got you as well into that space. I mean, you have been working with marketing as innovation over years already.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that perspective allows me to have better relationships with people, engineers who are thinking about applied innovation as well, right? They're thinking about how do I design a better board? How do I design a better heat sink? How do I think about additive versus subtractive manufacturing? All of those sorts of things. I can communicate better with them because they're thinking at a very kind of below the waterline level, things people will never see. Well, so am
Huh,
I.
huh,
What they don't want to talk with kind of the advertising people yet. They want to talk with kind of the product marketing people. Same thing with operations, with supply chain. Those are, when you think about applied innovation, it really takes a number of different people who are all kind of bringing their own skills together to the table who can help kind of make that happen. For instance, when in our introduction we talked about the basically the lotto, the cow sex lotto ticket. Okay. Well, here's the thing, like, yeah, there was kind of solving the right problem, so there's a product marketing sort of question there. When you think about that, there's a materials question. You've got to think about the adhesive that makes sure that you can stick that lottery ticket to the back of a cow. You've got to think about uh, what's the right material on top of that. What's the right supply chain so that you can get those materials from the right suppliers? If all those things don't work together, you don't have a product. You just have PowerPoint slides. And I am not interested in PowerPoint engineering. I want real products in front of real people, uh, kind of that agile sort of methodology, working software. I would say you take that to the physical product side as well. It's not just about software. It's about real products in front of real users and customers. That's how you know. Otherwise, you're just talking about stuff. And that's not interesting to me.
yeah. And it's like you said in the beginning, it's solving real problems, not just something, which is just for the fun of it.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with art and creativity.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's kind of what makes the world a beautiful place to be, that people can create art that has no, that just is communicating a message that they want to tell the world. That's fantastic. I love that. My dad was an artist. I'm an artist in my own way. But there's a difference between creativity and innovation. Creativity is an expression. It's a beautiful expression, but it's an expression. Innovation is a partnership.
Mm.
Innovation, you don't really innovate unless there are two people coming together, the person with the innovation and the person who is adopting the innovation. If there's no adoption, there's no behavior change because of your innovation, you have not innovated. It's as simple as that, that you can't just talk about it. You have to work together, and it has to be a two-way discussion, at least.
Yeah. If we double click on that artist thing, I was reading about you that you have been grown up in a family of artists, immigrants, and entrepreneurs. And that's one of the reasons why you are so successful today. Can you give us a little iteration on that pun?
I think when I grew up, uh, I didn't grow up with a mom and dad who worked in kind of big corporate America and went through a progression over time. And at the end of their career, they got the gold watch and retired. I grew up where uh, my relatives were starting new businesses. They never had that kind of security or certainty. People coming from, half my family is from Cuba,
Hmm.
where they came over after the Cuban Revolution in the 1960s and had to start a new life here. People coming and starting auto mechanic businesses, painting businesses, doing freelance work, doing advertising work. So I was immersed in that culture and that mindset growing up. It's not that I don't respect people who have more of a what I'd call a traditional upbringing. Just that just wasn't me. So, when I grew up, it was not weird to go on a photo shoot with my dad and be looking at new breakfast cereals and looking in test kitchens. That was just part of how I grew up. I thought that was normal. I thought every kid did that. uh, but I came to discover that no, most people don't have that kind of experience, and they have no concept of what that kind of, yeah, you're kind of on your own and you got to make something happen. That's just not something that everybody shares. That's okay. But uh, I think that's kind of fundamentally changed my outlook on the world is uh, I don't think anything is permanent.
Uh,
Change is a constant, and you got to find something constructive to do with your time. Otherwise, you're not going to have a really fulfilling life. That's so, yeah, that maybe the best way to answer that question is I am a product of the people who came before me.
yeah. The interesting part of that, I've now done plus 150 podcast episodes. And when you talk to innovators, there's one red thread, which I have explored, is that most of the innovators, they have these diverse backgrounds, funnily enough. So they're not going like the normal way. They're exposing or what have been exposed throughout their life to different experiences automatically, and then somehow ended up in the realm of innovation. It's quite interesting to see that with you as well.
I think it's funny. I don't. I've noticed the same thing myself. That when you talk with other engineers and product development people, people who really love it and
Mm.
who are in it and they love it, in it to win it. I find that they're all just weirdos. We're just lovely weirdos, and they and there's something about that, I think, Jens, that is about how different experiences open your mind to different ways of looking at the world, because that's really all innovation is
Mm.
we have this and this that have never been combined before, and well, maybe this would combined with this would be something that would solve this new problem. Maybe not. Actually, most of the time it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Uh, most of the time it blows up in your face. Quite literally and unfortunately sometimes. But you just when you kind of grow up with that perspective, you see so many different things. Things like failure don't bother you the way they bother other people,
Yeah.
because you're so used to it. It's I can't tell you how many times a new product or new innovation that I've worked on has not worked. More than 90%, easy.
Yeah.
Most of them don't work. You just if you don't if the next one doesn't excite you, you don't stay in this for long. So most people are pretty comfortable with different things and experiencing new things and being uncomfortable. That's just kind of what they like.
Yeah, and it's kind of part of the learning process. If you don't fail, then something is wrong in between.
Yeah, my dad used to tell me, and he stole this from somewhere else. Good artists create, great artists steal. Uh, what he said is, you can only build on success, but you can only learn from failure.
Yeah.
So if you're not failing, you're not learning. And the problem is, if you don't fail enough, you tend to get this kind of psychological break that your success is your fault, like due to your intrinsic abilities rather than luck, rather than just kind of where you started in life. I think it's failure is so critical for giving you that kind of humility and perspective to really listen to other people and really. I have never met a good innovator who is also kind of an obviously successful, who sees themselves as a successful person.
Yeah.
Successful innovators, almost without fail, when you dig beneath the surface in their veneer, will tell you, I'm a failure most of the time.
Yeah, I can
And
relate
that's
to
what makes them good.
that. So let's move into products and product launching, which is one of the topics you are, let's say, fluent in. Before we go into your book, of course. So, from a product innovation, from a product development and launching products, what have been the learnings you have had where you have used all the knowledge from growing up on dairy farms and innovating with dairy farms and having this innovative upbringing, which is not really an innovative, like you said, it's normal, and I see that. But how can you utilize the learnings you have, which are maybe not from a university standpoint learnings, but life experiences in a product launch, in that development process?
Yeah, that's a high quality question. Uh, it's difficult. You get to a certain point in your career when you become good at anything, whatever it is. And people who are experts in anything, one of the things that makes them good at something is they forget how to explain how to be good at it to other people
Yeah.
because it's just kind of it's natural. There are a few things though that I think were important. Obviously, having some of those uh, kind of academic experiences are actually valuable when you think about just understanding how to like for me calculating return on on invested capital and doing portfolio analysis and things like that don't come naturally to me,
Hmm.
but it's important to be able to use additional tools to help you evaluate ideas and help you be a better innovator. And I think it's really, Jens, I think it's really about the mindset that you are always curious. That's just there's a colleague of mine has it on his Twitter profile that he says he is promiscuously curious, and I just love that. I love those words. I wish I could steal him, but I know him too well, and he would know that I stole it. But I think it's an apt description for most innovators, and certainly an apt description for me. I am curious about everything. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter what it is. And I think that's if there was one secret that I could tell people, it's hard to uh, it's hard to describe. It can be hard to communicate to other people how to be curious about something, how to be interested in things, how to be interested in other people, how to be interested in how things work. Uh, but it can be trained.
Hmm.
You can start with things that you're kind of tangentially interested in, and then kind of grow from there. Kind of a fun story, kind of a fun recent thing. Uh, I had the opportunity to connect. I was a kid, by the way, who loved dinosaurs. I think every kid loves dinosaurs,
Yeah,
but
me
I
too.
loved dinosaurs. This was before Jurassic Park and before they were cool. Loved them, loved them, loved them, loved them, and never stopped loving them. Okay. And I had the opportunity to connect recently with Dr. Denver Fowler, who runs the Badlands Dinosaur Museum in North Dakota in the United States, one of the most premier kind of research institutions in the world for dinosaur research. Just fantastic stuff. Worked with Bob Backer, uh, figuring out that birds evolved from dinosaurs. All really cool stuff. Very, very smart people. And we had the opportunity to talk because he's interested in how to talk to people about science and just wanted my take on how to market the process of science to people so that they would understand it. And I took the opportunity to totally geek out on this guy on how they know, for instance, that here's kind of a fun thing that they found in the research, and you could go read these research papers, and I'd invite you to do that. Uh, that the in the movies Jurassic Park, they had the Velociraptor. Everybody remembers the Velociraptor, right?
Hmm.
It has that one claw, that big claw, and they said, oh, it kind of takes that big claw and it kind of eviscerates people, and it was all this kind of like, oh, that's so gross. Here's the thing: what is so cool in their research papers is that instead of just kind of assuming that's what the claw was for, what Dr. Fowler and his colleagues did was they researched how current raptors hunt with them, because that's an adaptation that you see in hawks and falcons and eagles and owls. They actually did quantitative analysis of the curvature of those claws, the length of the claws, the strength, and it figured out that raptors probably did not use their claw in that way. They probably used it the same way hawks do today. When they pin a mouse, they use that big claw to hold it down while they start to eat it alive. That's how they do that there. And the quantitative analysis helps you see that. That's what I mean by just being curious about stuff. You just want it. There is no purpose. I have no client who is thinking about killing small rodents as a new innovation.
Yeah.
It's just what I think. I am just fascinated with how the world works. And when you are, you think, well, here's what you could take away from that. It's like, well, what other things about the world or about what we assume to be true don't actually hold up to real evidence? What other assumptions do we have about how people act or what people will buy that just simply aren't true?
Yeah.
And we need to actually ask some good questions. That's what I love, love, love about the scientific process. And yeah, I had to learn. Yeah, the first time I read these papers, I had to look up about 50 words. Uh, did you know that there's the difference between extinct and extant? Extant means still alive, extinct means dead. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. I had to look that up. But
Yeah.
now I know that, and uh, I got a lot of stuff in the hard drive up here that probably is not really useful. But I suspect when you talk with other innovators, they've got their own stories of weird stuff. It probably drives their spouses crazy. It certainly drives mine crazy. But oh, that was a really long answer to a short question, Jens. A
But that's
high
good.
quality question. High
That
quality question.
that's good. Thank you. Um, I would like to ask a follow-up question to that because you said you helped them with the marketing topics. How did you utilize that then in helping them with marketing?
Yeah, here's the thing. Their big question, kind of the big, hairy, audacious question, the B hack that they're trying to figure out is how do you teach people? How do you get people engaged in the scientific process?
Right.
Okay. Most of the time, when you go to a museum, most people have been to a museum at some point. And what do you see when you go into the museum? You see an exhibit and it has a plaque at the bottom and it tells you what the interpretation is, what you're supposed to take from whatever exhibit it is. Fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that's a very passive way to learn things. Instead, what Dr. Fowler wants to do is he wants to show people how they came up with that. How do you get people engaged in the process of learning that science? And like, oh, how did we figure out that this particular animal used to burrow into the ground? What were the other things it could have been? And how did we eliminate those possibilities to get to this one? So that's what they're trying to figure out. What we talked about was, well, do you know how conspiracy theories work and the psychology around that? Conspiracy theories work, and those sort of things work by inviting the user, inviting the consumer of the information to do their own research, to kind of figure it out on their own. Now they'll breadcrumb along the way, and you can lead people down real nasty rabbit holes with that sort of thing. But the psychology is funny. They also call it the IKEA effect. The
Mm.
IKEA effect is a cognitive bias that says when I put together that desk, even if that desk is crappy, I have more value in that desk because I built it than if I hadn't built it. And it's the same kind of psychology. So he and I talked about how do you allow people to do a little bit of their own research to kind of see it for themselves. When they do that, that's when it sticks in the head. If you just tell people what it is, or even if you show them how you did it, let them do it themselves. That's the trick. And so he is going through the process of building totally new exhibits that show people, kids especially, how science is actually done and let them do it themselves. I mean, how cool is that?
It's
That is
awesome.
fantastic. And I think we need that sort of thing where people understand how science works. I can't think of a more important topic right now. So, kind of labor of love for me. And he sends me all the research papers too. So and photos of their digs. They're kind of extracting a T-Rex skull last week. Oh, it was so cool.
That's cool. I mean, it doesn't really sound like work. It more sounds like fun.
It's I think you know life can be tough. There's a lot of negativity in the world, Jens.
Oh yeah.
As you know, I mean, if you focus on that, that's what you get. I don't discount that all those bad things are there in the world. I mean, that's of course they are, but if you focus on those things, it wrecks you psychologically. I'd rather focus on the things that are fun and interesting. And actually, I'd rather be an actor than an activist. I want to do stuff, not just talk about stuff.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, that it gives you some power over it.
Yeah. And that's also the part of being an innovator. You can try to solve problems. You might not do it every time, but at least you try it.
You know what? You actually don't do it most of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
It's what is that like? Something like uh, uh, my first boss, great engineer, optical engineer, great guy, love him, Kevin Pitkin. Worked for ADC Telecommunications back in the day, and now works for Bench. Great guy. If you're listening, hey Kevin. Uh, he used to tell me that, hey, you if you want to get into product development, you'd have better luck at the roulette wheel in Las Vegas. The odds are better to launch a successful product is maybe 1 in 100. You're going to get, you actually have better luck betting on, a black 19 on the roulette wheel. You have better odds, and at least it's fair. And at least really fast whether you win or lost. Product innovation it's not for everybody because it takes a long time, and a lot of times you just don't know if you failed. So you can convince yourself that you were successful, and you take some joy out of the learning process. That's that curiosity. To me, it's not failure. It's, oh, what did I learn? That's interesting. Not everybody sees it that way. Sometimes you get fired when you fail. That's all right. I'd rather that than stick around at a place where you have to succeed all the time. You don't take any risks. What fun is that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a big topic of taking the risk and just trying things out, because we're living in a world, at least in my opinion, we're living in a world where you're not supported to take risk. Specifically, if you come from the world where I come from, which is large corporations, it's like you're trained to de-risk from the beginning before you even
Absolutely.
start.
That's the thing. That when people wonder, like, how could we make large organizations more innovative? And the number one thing you could do is make failure more acceptable, uh, uh, just culturally acceptable, because it's not. Failure is not culturally acceptable at most large organizations, because at a certain point, it becomes more risky to innovate than it is to just go acquire a company that has been innovating.
Right.
And so it can be really disheartening to work in those large organizations. I have, and it's tough because unless you're in the process of going and buying other companies, which I've done, uh, you don't really get to innovate yourself. You just get to recognize and buy other people who've done it. Ugh,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's fine. I just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Other people can do that stuff, do the financial analysis. That's great. There are people better at that than me.
Great. Let's get into your book. So before I ask you about the story, which I guess you have told on other podcasts, I would love to hear from you when you have first ever, like the first day that you told your family at home that, hey, I'm going to write a book. How did they react?
Oh, that's funny. My family, like my wife, is a beautiful, understanding woman, and knows me well enough. We've been married a long time, and knows me well enough to know, hey, you're gonna go do a thing, and so full support. Just, hey, let's have fun. But I didn't start out writing a book.
Mm.
I'm an iterator. I've taken that agile philosophy to heart. So I didn't start out to write a book. I started out saying, well, I'm interested in presidential history. I'm interested in innovation and marketing. I'd love to put those two things together and see what I learn. That'd be neat. But I have no idea where that's going to go, and it
Mm.
probably will fail. That's how you look at it up front. Like, well, that's probably not going to work out. So let's start small and see what happens. And instead of kind of writing the book at first, I started with a weekly email and blog. I had 4 or 5 thousand people who, for some reason, listened to me. And, so I started writing kind of one president each week, and I would need to research, I'd need to find an angle I wanted to take, kind of connect some aspect of their history with some aspect of marketing and innovation, put them together into something coherent.
Hmm.
Some were better than others, and publish them each week, and it kept me on a pace. That that's one thing I've learned about kind of the innovation process is it is active. You need to kind of work at it. You need to put yourself on a schedule. That's key. I did that. I figured, well, the 2020 election in the United States was big. Kind of the Trump Biden election that was going to
Hmm.
be big. There's probably going to be a lot of attention around that. So, hey, I backed up 45 weeks and I started kind of each week along there because I thought, oh, it'll build up until the election. Well, that part didn't really work all that well. It's not like this thing cascaded into something bigger. But what it taught me was, hey, over time, over the course of 40 to 45 weeks, I kind of found my footing and found my voice and
Hmm.
figured out how to do it. So when I decided, why don't I collect those things into a book? It's not like anyone I was talking to had to decide, well, should you even write a book or not? It's like, no, I had already kind of had a beta version of the book.
Yeah.
And now I was going to make kind of the full version. So it just wasn't that same level of risk. I mean, there was a ton of editing, there was a ton of stuff I needed to do, but it wasn't the idea behind it and kind of the execution. I knew the idea was sound, and now I just needed to do the execution. I had a proof of concept. I needed to make it manufacturable and manufacturing ready. If you think about it from a product development perspective, like, yeah, I can't have like wires coming off it. I can't have, kind of a generic plastic clamshell on there. I need to actually uh, design the final product. So, yeah, so there wasn't like a, hey, you're crazy to write a book. And then I wrote it. And then everyone's like, wow, you actually pulled it off. Like, I don't think that's how innovation works. So, at least I don't
Yeah.
think that's how it should work. Uh, so I kind of took the book Marketer in Chief is really it was natural to me to write it that way. Totally natural because that's the way innovation works most of the time. So yeah, that's another long answer to a high quality question, Jens. I have not been asked that question. I appreciate that one.
That's good. Then I was the first. No, it's quite interesting that from an innovation process, and then we go really into the book. Um, you have literally validated your assumptions on the way. So you could have stopped after, let's say, 30 presidents and said, "Nah, it's not really. I'm not getting energy out of it, and nobody's interested in it."
Exactly. Uh, when earlier I had, and before this, if people look me up, they might see other articles. So, yeah, it may actually be familiar with me from articles I wrote a couple of years ago. I was writing about digital privacy. I was
Mm.
writing about, okay, people don't understand how Google Maps work. They don't understand how Amazon Alexa work. They don't understand how skills work, and you know what the privacy implications of all those things are. I got millions of reads on those articles, and I thought, okay, well, what if I kept writing along those lines and I put those together in some sort of a book? Shoshana Zuboff had been writing Surveillance Capitalism. There was a lot of zeitgeist around that at the time, and I thought this could be something. I mean, I got a story to tell there. Well, I kept writing, and even though it was successful from an outside perspective, I got no energy from it at all, Jens.
Yeah.
Just the more I wrote about it, the less I wanted to. And like people would read about it and they'd comment and they'd be all angry and they'd be all caps on the comments, and then no one would do anything about it. No one would stop using their iPhone. No
Yeah.
one would stop using Google Maps. No one would. More people are on Facebook than ever. So I think about that and I think, well, yeah, I'm creating, but I'm not innovating. Innovating, the other person needs to change their behavior because of what you created. That's the innovation process. Otherwise, you're just doing art. And uh, that wasn't interesting to me. I wasn't getting energy from that because there was no feedback.
Mm.
So I stopped. I stopped writing about it. It's not that I don't care. It's that, yeah, I failed at that. Totally fine. It allowed me to give myself the mental bandwidth to work on something different that did turn out okay. So I don't mind if I mess up a whole bunch of times. It's just important to kind of recognize that and quit.
Yeah, and
It's
I
okay.
think I truly believe that you have tuned so many skills that helped you to do the second part and writing the book and so on already early on. So it's not wasted at all. It's just didn't give you energy.
Yeah, I don't think there are a lot of things I took out of that and I learned
Hmm.
from that process. I don't consider the time wasted. It just I didn't want to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I know a lot of innovators, and I think that especially in large organizations, when people listening to this who are embedded in a big organization, I think failure is one of those things that they don't talk enough about. And number two, they don't quit.
Yeah.
There's no process to stop something that's clearly not working anymore. That is, it's kind of the Abilene paradox, right? That uh, four people in a car. Where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? I don't know. The four people don't really decide. They ended up in Abilene, Texas. That's kind of where the cognitive bias comes from. No one knows how the hell they got there, but they got there, and no one can explain that process. Well, let's not do that, huh? uh, let's quit things that are not working so that we can redirect those energy and resources somewhere else. And we don't treat people like they're a failure. We don't fire people when that happens. We recognize that they have experience and they have skills that they've honed through that will help them on the next thing. I just think we are getting that completely backwards. That people who fail are the ones who are learning. The people who are successful often got lucky. And you need to recognize the difference between those two things. It's not that all successful people are, you know, aren't skilled. That's not what I'm saying. But luck and just random chance has a lot more to do with success than most people give it credit for. I'd rather have a bunch of people on my team who had failed at a bunch of stuff because that stings and they are unlikely to make those mistakes again. People who are successful are blind to the things that could go wrong.
Yeah. Can't agree more. So, marketer in chief. Tell us a little bit about what is the book about and how did you get to that title? How did you bring all of that together into the final product?
Well, the thing is, marketer in chief was I had kind of that working title in the beginning. The rest of it, kind of how each president sold the American idea, that came later.
Hmm.
What is that I learned? I was in academia for a little while. I taught some classes and did research, I have a Google Scholar profile. I've done actual research, published peer-reviewed research. And they told me like every title needs to have a colon in it. Something catchy, colon, something descriptive. That's kind of all academic papers work. So I knew I had to do something like that. So the first part of the title, the catchy part, kind of was in my mind all the time. Uh, Really, what I wanted to talk with people about is one of the roles of a leader. The president of the United States, obviously, in this case, because presidents, leaders are popular people, and it's easy for people to get their arms around that. But it's more than just the president of the United States, of course, that every leader, whether they're a political leader, an organizational leader, leader of a nonprofit, has a role of chief salesperson, defender of the brand, communicator, innovator. All of those things have to be part of the job description. And what I found is when I looked out into books about presidential history, yeah, they talked about their life, they talked about political experiences, they talked about wars, kind of the conduct of wars, the conduct of Franklin Roosevelt and the Great Depression, all of those sorts of things. Some of them talked about like political campaigns. That's like talking about advertising. Remember,
Mm,
there's all that
mm,
stuff beneath the waterline that's more interesting than the advertising. And they were talking about the political campaigns as if that's what it meant to be marketer in chief. And I knew that that wasn't it. There's so much more below the surface. So I wanted to tell those stories. And I wanted to show kind of how each of the 45 presidents needed to sell this idea of the United States. And that idea changes over time, but there's interesting stuff at each one of those different stages that sometimes it's about political campaigns, sometimes it's about messaging, but often it's really not. And those are the chapters that are more interesting to me, are the ones that they're about marketing, but not the marketing that people tend to think and tend to come first to their mind. So 45 really mind-blowing stories you are unlikely to hear anywhere else. That's my pitch for the book.
yeah, that's great. And I think it's um, interesting because I got a copy from you and I was able to have a glance. And I wasn't reading it fully, but I definitely will. I promise. Um, it's not just interesting for Americans who are, of course, deeply rooted into knowing all the presidents. I only know the last five, maybe if I'm lucky. Um, but I think it's super interesting because we can learn so much from history.
Yeah.
If you're an innovator, if you're a marketer, and working with the future, and I'm a true believer of understanding history and political concepts will help you to innovate in a better way and help as well specifically in corporate settings to look into, okay, how did they do that, understanding through stories, understanding the perspective, and then it's not copy pasting it, but taking a story from maybe 1950, taking a story from 2002 or whatever, like, and then you bring them into a different context and then, hey, that's not that bad and I can utilize that. So it's definitely super interesting book as well for people who are not Americans.
I hope so. I think that what I tried to do is I tried to uh, think about that. The whole idea of innovation, right, is that I take something that some other context, some other experience, and I have a problem today. What can I apply from that prior situation to my new problem? And when I think about history, what I wanted to show is that those stories, those things have resonance for us today.
Hmm.
There's a story about James Monroe, president number five, the fifth president. And to be clear, most Americans don't have a good sense of their presidents either. And I think part of it's the way history is taught. History is taught in this kind of dry way.
Yeah.
My book's not dry. It's written by an advertising person and an innovator. It's not going to be dry. Uh, but James Monroe, fifth president, almost got into a duel with Alexander Hamilton. Most people know who Alexander Hamilton is. Not a president, but big figure in early United States history. They almost got into a duel. Why did they get into a duel? It's because there was this crime of reputation. You know, back in those days, it used to be that you besmirched my honor and you insulted me. So what they would do is two grown men would walk out into a field with pistols and shoot at each other in a ritualized way. Here's the thing. What's interesting about that story, if we think about it more abstractly, we think, well, wait a second. If someone was harmed, like you went and you punched somebody in the face, in most countries in the world, there is some sort of legal repercussion to that. You might go to prison. You will certainly have to compensate that victim in some way. There's something about that. But crimes of reputation, where if you're on Twitter and you insulted me, what's my recourse to you?
Hmm. Hmm.
And people think, well, that's not that big of a deal. It's just on Twitter. It's just an insult. Well, here's the thing. Well, what if that reduces my economic opportunities? Maybe if a client won't want to do business with me because you lied about me and now people believe that lie.
Hmm.
Well, so there are real impacts to reputational harm. Well, that's the same thing that's happening now on Twitter. Like, we just don't go out with guns and shoot each other most of the time. Okay. But it can have real consequences like that. People's mental health. We hear a lot about how things on Facebook, Twitter, WeChat have real mental health impacts. We have not solved that problem that James Monroe and Alexander Hamilton had not solved 200 years ago. We still don't have a legal recourse or some set recourse to handle issues of reputational harm. That's the kind of story that I tell in Marketer in Chief. How, hey, dueling culture and cancel culture are the same thing.
Hmm.
They're really talking about the same underlying problem. And how do we understand that in a better way? That's the kind of story you probably had not heard that relates to something you have heard about. That's what makes the book interesting, in my opinion. It's just not only stories you hadn't heard, but applications of those stories that you wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah, and I think that's really an interesting point because you can learn so much from the political development. And if you just look, I was reading another book as well, which goes into the 2000s and what happened in like on the different elections in until today or until last year in the US as an example, that the whole social media marketing is completely different world than it was at that time in just the
Right.
last 20 years. It's huge difference, and how influential these platforms like Twitter or Facebook or any other are already, or the usage of them or misusage.
Yeah. I think I cover exactly that topic in chapter 45, which should be obvious by the number. He who I will not name because he gets enough publicity as it is. The angle I cover is about him. It's about the transformation in digital marketing and social media marketing that has changed how elections are run.
Hmm.
And that's something where we get into the mechanics of advertising and marketing at a tactical level, because most people don't quite understand how, like, they see advertising on TV or they'll see it like these video ads, and they don't really realize that that's just the part you can see.
Yeah.
What's underneath that is the kind of micro targeting, household by household, based on the electoral map. In the United States, we elect our president via the Electoral College, which is usually in most states a winner take all. So if you win 50.001% of the vote in that state, you win all the electoral votes for that state. Well, that kind of hyper targeting is something that digital marketing can do. And that's what the Trump campaign did in 2016 that the Clinton campaign did not do nearly as well. And one of the root causes of Trump winning, especially as close as he did, was exactly that. He was better at micro targeting, and people just didn't see it at the time. Even the Clinton campaign didn't quite see how powerful it was at the time, to their detriment.
Yeah. And I think that's also something we can learn from a business context,
Yes.
because you can literally use the same strategies as a business. You can utilize the learnings from a political context in a business context, small or big, doesn't really matter, because the tools are there. You can use that way of thinking. That's why I think the book is as well so applicable from a business context, because you learn throughout these stories and how you can utilize these things. It's just a different context. You need to be open to, willing to understand different context in that. But I think it's super applicable from a business context.
I think so too. That's obviously my point of view, being in innovation and commercial, kind of commercialism, to help really understand what is the application to business today. And I take pains, at least I attempt to, in each chapter, to make sure it's relevant in that way, that people could see, oh, how could I make this work in my own life, whether that's personal or professional. But I'm a business person, so most of my applicability is from a business sort of context, and helping people understand the connection between something that happened and a story to how they can apply that today in a situation they might be facing. So it's 45 little case studies and lessons. And the thing I like best about teaching anybody is it's a natural way for people to learn, right? The parable and the story are just natural ways for people to understand the world. And it's a lot better than, well, here are the names, dates, and places. Important stuff, you got to get it. But if you don't care about the characters in the story, you're not going to learn the details.
Yeah, agree. Stories teach so much.
They do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would like to leave the book. Did we miss anything in the book which we have to nail before we move on?
No, you know what? You're gonna have a lot of fun reading it, Jens. Your listeners will as well. It's great. It's paperback and an ebook and an audiobook available globally.
Yeah.
Uh, my preference, I love all three. I love each iteration, but my favorite's the audiobook. And it's available on Audible. And I narrated it myself. I had to learn all of the audio mixing, and I had to learn all of that stuff. Uh, but I wrote the book to be listened to as well as read.
That's
So
cool.
yeah, I'm hoping that if you're like, boy, I don't want to read this big thick book. uh, Each chapter is about 20 to 30 minutes long. So if you're on the treadmill or
Yeah.
you're taking a walk, you can listen to one chapter and get it and then pick it up later. It's totally written to be read. You don't have to read the prior chapter to get
Yeah.
the next one. So you'll like it.
Yeah. Awesome. Now I will of course put the links as well to you
Thank you.
and the book into the show notes that everyone can straight click through.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Let's get into the last part, which is a couple of questions I'm asking to every guest. Let's start with the biggest one. If there's a problem in the world, um, you could be solving. So if you could be part of a project that's impacting every human being on Earth, what project would you choose to work on and why?
That's a high quality question. I think the biggest thing I see uh, in the world today is understanding how science works. And we've learned that over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, but that's not the only time that we've seen people misunderstand and kind of not be able to think through the scientific process. When we think about climate change, when we think about major issues, uh, science is a tool to help us figure that out, but it's very difficult. Most people don't understand the scientific process, how it works, and kind of how it embraces uncertainty. That's a very difficult thing for people to understand, is that the scientific community is a argumentative, uh, they fight with each other. It's very Darwinian in terms of the best ideas over time uh come to the fore. But from an outsider's perspective, that can look like disagreement. That can look like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Think about nutritional science, for instance. How many different diets and what's good for you, what's not good for you? I want to work on, and part of what I'm working on with Dr. Fowler, is how to teach people the process of science so that they can understand it and start to incorporate it into their own lives in a way that's not, the scientist will tell you what to do and what to think. The scientist will help teach you how to think. That's a tough problem. That's not easy. I don't know how we're going to solve that problem, but I'm excited to be in it and working on it.
Yeah, great problem.
I think it's a high quality problem. Isn't that it? That's the find a high quality problem. Doesn't matter what it is. High
Yeah,
quality problems don't have easy solutions.
absolutely. Next question. Where will you be in a year from now? And you can answer that from a personal and or business side.
I have a portfolio career. I have, clients that I help with marketing and innovation. I have startup businesses. I have a writing career, lots of different things. Uh, so the portfolio will grow over time, but I can't know what a year from now will bring. No one can.
Mm.
There could be another pandemic, and then who knows what'll happen. I hope not. But if there was, you need to adapt. The key thing is that if I have multiple things going on in balance, I can look a year out from now and I may need to rebalance that portfolio. I may need to stop doing something, start doing something else. But the idea is that as change happens in kind of a portfolio mindset of how I handle my professional career, things can come in and out and it's okay. That actually makes it stronger. A more diverse portfolio is a stronger portfolio. Personally, I'm a Gen Xer. My wife and I are both Gen Xers, and we're nomads. We're explorer types, and we're going to be hitting the road. And what the pandemic has taught us is that we can work from anywhere.
Mm.
We can go anywhere. We can, if we wanted to work in Dublin for 2 months, we could stay there for a couple of months, not overstaying our visa or anything like that. But we could work out of there for a couple months. We could any state in the United States is fine. It's those laws are pretty good. Uh, so we're gonna hit the road, and you know, uh, and see what we want to expose ourselves to on purpose to more experiences, more different ways to different people, different environments. We don't know what that will bring us, but we're kind of excited to go find out.
Yeah, great. Last question. How do you keep yourself up to date on topics that interest you?
That's not a problem at all. Those things find me. I think the biggest thing is what like a Nassim Taleb would call via negativa. Here's what he means by that. That how do you improve something by subtracting bad stuff rather than focusing on the good stuff? So I have a lot of things that interest me. What I have gotten good at is removing all the things that don't and that bother me. So I don't. I, I used to every morning I would get up and I'd read the local newspaper. I'd go online and read the local newspaper. Maybe I would also go to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. Uh, I, I would not read Der Spiegel. Sorry, but maybe the Guardian, things like that. What I noticed though is that those things, those stories were meant to kind of get that dopamine hit going,
Mm.
the kind of
Mm.
scare headline, mostly opinion in the article, not a whole lot of hard fact in there. And it's meant to kind of generate an emotional reaction so that you keep clicking and keep coming back. It was an addiction. So I stopped doing that. Each week I've got a little feed that'll come in and kind of make sure I hit the top things that I kind of need to know about. But in general, by removing the junk from the process, I feel better about like, oh, I can let the other stuff in. And I have more mental energy now to read about things that are interesting to me because my brain is not taken up with things that aren't. And that'd be my suggestion to people is like, hey, take Facebook off your phone. Take all social media stuff off your phone and make you like don't save the password on like what on your so you have to go to your desktop computer. Don't save the password. You got to look this thing up and you got to type it in. Make the process of getting into one of those intentional so that like, oh, hey, maybe every few days I'll go in there and I'll kind of check it out, but I'm not going to waste my time with that. Those things aren't meant to generate your curiosity. They are meant to dopamine hit, uh, and just get rid of them. Don't log in as much, and you'll be happier, and you'll find time for things that are really exciting for you.
Yeah, I I can agree to that. And it's the fun part. Everyone thinks that I'm online the whole time because I'm quite out there, but everything is programmed. It's not that I'm doing it straight away. Like most probably, since we're talking, there have been like 2, 3 posts out there, but it's not from me. I didn't do that, and I didn't consume in the same time. That's the important part.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with that. There's always an opportunity to do a little bit of that kind of hop on Netflix and watch a couple of things. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But if you spent 3 hours a day watching Netflix or Disney Plus, whatever the case may be, uh, what else could you have been doing with
Yeah.
that time? Like, hey, if on Friday night you're like, hey, I'm a little fried, I want to watch the Great British Bake Off. Awesome. I love it, by the way. Huge Paul Hollywood fan. Okay. But I don't watch it every day. I'm not watching Squid Game, for instance, and binging that.
Mm.
Or whatever. I've never watched Game of Thrones. Never.
Yeah, me neither.
Just too much. It's just too much stuff. It's like a whole big thing. I'm like, I'm not really interested in that sort of thing. I couldn't get interested in it. So if I'm not interested, I just say no. And I don't care if like, oh, everyone's talking about Game of Thrones. I don't care. Like,
Mm.
how does that help me? If I got interested in it, I'd watch it. But I'm not. I didn't really think it was that good, honestly. The stuff that I did watch. So maybe
Yeah.
I'll read the book someday. When it's not cool anymore, then I'll probably read it.
I love that. Great. So, how can people reach out to you and where can people find you?
Easiest places to find me, two ways. Number one, go to marketerinchief.com. That's the easiest place to learn about the book. You learn a little bit about me. There are links to media appearances like this one, Jens. This will be on the website so people can listen to that, which is great. I love that people could find a way to buy the book wherever they want to buy their books.
Yeah.
But most of the time, people will see me on LinkedIn. Like I have Twitter accounts. I've got some of that other stuff. But most of the time, I'm kind of in the business and innovation community. And the easiest place for me to interact with other people there in a constructive way is on LinkedIn. So most people will find me there.
Yeah.
I'm the only Jason Voiovich there. You won't find a whole lot of others of me. So I'm easy to find and reach out to me and say, hey, I heard you on Yen's show. I'd love to connect with you. I'm open to that. Let's talk about it. Let's just have a fun conversation.
Super. Jason, thank you very much for being on the show. It was a pleasure having you.
Oh, thanks, Jens. I really appreciate it. What a blast. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. You will find the links and resources in the show notes of this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, the most impactful thing you can do is subscribing to the show on any of the podcasting platforms and give me a review. This will help me to reach more innovators around the world and bring some of you into the show. If you have any question to the guest or want to engage with me, feel free to reach out to me on social media and contact me there. Thanks and see you in the next episode.